It's the longest musical introduction I've ever had. I think it's going to go on till the end. Because I've seen larger audiences than you and a telephone deal. Why don't we sit here? Or there? I want the other side. You go the other side. Yeah. Why? The other side. But we won't have any pictures, but while we're talking. No sort of flashing. And that's an instruction. That's an instruction. Well, if you want some, we'll do some afterwards. Okay, so it's rather irritating to have things going on, particularly this time of the morning. You've got rather a thick head. I just wanted you to see the clothes, you know, to see how lovely it is. A bit warm. Right, Jeremiah.
Right. I think after so long, it's almost quite staggering that 16 years after you left the series, you're still being asked to appear as Doctor Who.
Yes, thank heavens.
I mean, when you made that decision, what was it, about February, March 24, that you were going to leave?
That's right.
Was that because you wanted to put Doctor Who perfectly behind you at that time?
No, it wasn't that at all. I left for several reasons. One is, of course, that dear Roger, who's one of my greatest friends, who played the Master, was killed. But that depressed us a lot. And Barry left, the producer, whom I had great admiration for. He was leaving. Terence Dix was leaving. Katie had left. I'd done a season with this Sladen. And it seemed to be the end of an era. But I went to Sean Sutton, who was the head of programs, and I said, well, look, I will stay on, if you like, for another season. Oh, he said, good. But what I would like is a little bit more Missoula. And he said, like how much? And I told him, and he said, we're very sorry to see you leave. Just like that. And I said, well, wouldn't you like to meet your brother directors and have a discussion about it? He said, no, I don't think so. He said, we have a budget and that's it, and we can't pay that sort of money, and so that was the end of it. That's really why I left.
No, Sean had actually brought you in to do Doctor
It was, yeah.
Now you said that at the time, when on the newspaper reports, when he asked you, or when you asked him how you played Doctor Who, he said, play it as yourself, and you said, I don't know who Jon Pertwee is.
That's correct.
In the next 5 years, did you actually find out who Jon?
Yes, I did. I've never played me, ever. I've been years in show business, but I never played myself. I'd always, what we call, hidden under a green umbrella. I played character roles, rather like Peter Sellers used to. And he never played himself either. He was dying to play himself, and that was the nearest thing he ever got to a human being now, which is one of the best things he ever made. But Sean asked me to do the program. I wasn't at all sure whether I wanted to, when I really began to think about it. Very strange thing, jumping ahead a bit, Kenny Evans, who was a brother actor of mine in the, you remember a show called The Navy Lark? Any of you remember that? And ran about 20 years. It was the longest running radio show in the history of comedy broadcasting. And he said, why don't you put yourself up for Doctor Who, because Patrick Troughton's leaving. So I suggested it to my agent, and he greeted the news with absolute horror and silence on the phone. And I said, oh, all right, forget it. He said, no, I'll ring if you like, but I don't think it's a very good idea. And he rang, he spoke to Derek Sherwin, who was then the producer of Doctor Who. And there was a terrible pause with Derek Sherwin when he mentioned my name. And Richard, my agent, said, yes, I thought so. I had the same reaction. And he said, no, I'm just staggered. My mouth is hanging open. He said, because your client's name you just mentioned is number 2 on our shortlist and has been for 18 months. Which is the most extraordinary thing. I really had no idea. I had no idea at all that I was on their shortlist. No, it never did me off. You're bound to know now who is the first one off the shortlist, and that was Ron Moody. You know Ron Moody? Oliver, it's Fagin and the great film of Oliver and many other things.
Now, Peter Bryan, who co-produced with Derek at the time, he very much wanted it, almost a Jon Pertwee medium science broadcast.
Yes, he did.
That's a lot of his ideas. And I think, indeed, looking at the first one, you see a spearhead from space and you're walking around in a wheelchair being pursued by aliens in an ambulance.
That's right.
It's quite apparent there's a lot of comedy elements in there.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose that changed almost with the next story. I suppose Barry was starting his first book.
Yeah, well, what it did, of course, is that yes, Peter wanted me, because I was, at that time, I'd been an actor from the year dot, and I'd always been a legitimate actor. And then I went illegitimate, as it were, after the war, because I'd gone into radio comedy with Uncle Eric Barker. We did a show called Waterlogged Spar, which had been a services show when I was in the Navy. And that got me into radio, and then got me onto the music halls, and of course it was the stars of radio that went onto the music halls. And so then I was in light entertainment, and therefore did a lot of comedy and a lot of cabaret. And this is what Peter Brown wanted. I played the guitar, I sing folk music, and Pat Troutman, of course, a penny whistle, and so he made a feature of something musical, and so they thought I'd be rather like a minstrel doctor, and play the lute and sing folk songs, the monsters, or something like that, which I did a little with Agatha, and so he wanted me to play for comedy, and I took a look at the brushes, the first one, and I was hideously embarrassed by myself. I said, this is awful, and I hated that sequence, in front of the mirror, trying on the different hats, the flat hat, and the big hat, and the floppy hat, and going, no, let one do, and then
running around the field in your nightgown.
That's right. Well, that was actually that, but that was a hospital gown, and that bore some relation to truth, because I'd been in a hospital. But I didn't like that, and so after the very first episode, I said, let's cut down on the comedy, it isn't going to work, let me play it the way I want to. I now feel like I'm playing, which was for the first time I'd ever played me.
So really, you have to see that first one to get the feel of what
exactly
spin one.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very important, because the very first time I played Wurzel Gummidge, which is a very difficult thing to suddenly become a scarecrow, and to walk like a scarecrow with a twigs and straw with no brains. And it's a very difficult thing when you're an intelligent guy. And I was very concerned about this, the very first one that I did, you saw the very first one of Wurzel, when he's on his post all covered in mud and it pours with rain, and the rain washes the mud off his face, and he comes to life, and he comes off the boat. He frightened the bejesus out of every child in the country. And everybody's going, oh my God, this is a horror program, this is going on for kids. So we quickly learned, and even in the last episode of the first story of Wurzel Gummidge, my makeup was different. I had cornhouse eyebrows, which I hadn't done in the first scene. So you develop, it's very difficult on the first day, you've never played a part before, you go in, bang, and that shot really is going to be it, what you're going to do for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever, however long the series runs. That's it, you can't change it that much. So it is damn difficult, and so it was equally as me as the doctor, but that luckily, because the situation allowed for a chase and allowed for a bit of comedy, we got away with it.
But one of the great things that one of your co-performers on Wurzel Gummidge, which is Jeffrey Bell, Doctor Who, said about, you never actually really on quite like it, because you put so much of yourself into the characters, you felt so much of the characters, and he was often quite astounded, in fact, he almost burst into tears on cue and bring almost the whole performance to a halt. It's quite spontaneous. Is that so much of something that's in you in the way that you approach the role?
Yes, I think it is. If something's well written and I really believe in it, then I can become it. I can become it very quickly. Some people have to go off for hours before to get themselves into a role. Some people, like Mickey Rourke, I gather, have to be the murderer or be the lunatic. And you try to live with a man, you have to live with a lunatic. I mean, it's impossible. Just in hospital, it's exactly the same. He gets himself so much into a character that you can't live with him if it's an unlawful character. I can do it pretty quickly, but once I get into that character, then that's why I'm to begin with, a lot of the crews think that I'm a pain in the backside, because I insist on silence and say, please, keep quiet, because once that camera is on, I'm gone. And the slightest bit of noise will break my concentration, particularly in a scene where words will often resolve into tears himself. And of course, the terrible thing is that Jeffrey is a superb actor, played the Crowman in Wurzel Gummidge and played Catweasel, remember Catweasel. I used to do an emotional scene with him, and I'd look at him, and tears would be streaming down his cheeks, and I'd say afterwards, you're not supposed to be crying, it's me, it's my gag. And he said, I can't help. We once had the crew sobbing and weeping, so much that the director said, stop, this is ridiculous. And he went off himself, he went off himself, they all had a nice cry, and then we got back together and where does almost the Pertwee style actually come from? Because I believe your days of RADA are hardly distinguished. No, they weren't. I was thrown out of RADA for being utterly incompetent. In fact, I was thrown out of practically every school I ever went to for being utterly incompetent. But they were very true. I mean, I was utterly incompetent. But I wasn't utterly incompetent as an actor, but I refused to be a Greek wind. They wanted me to be a Greek wind, and I said, really, at £250 a term, which was a hell of a lot of money in those days, I really don't want to spend time going, which is what they expected us to do. You sat about 2 dozen each side of the stage going, that was rubbish about the mother all that. And so have you heard the story before? We don't want to repeat it. Hands up, who hasn't heard the story? Oh, we're not sure you are. And the principal said, Mother, you refuse to give Greek win, but then you must leave, but I can't have rebels for our academy. So you have no future with your father in this sort of thing, you must go. And so I was duly chucked out, but there was a play we were doing, and in this play, at the end of the season, Noah Coward was present, he was the guest of honor, and I played the man who was murdered in the first act, and I played the murderer who found out who murdered me, and the detective who found out who murdered me in the last. And that's not good, and the 2 roles, the man who was murdered and the one who found out who murdered me. And so I did a tremendous sort of make-up job, with raincoats and moustaches, the detective and hair parted in the middle of the monocle for the man who was murdered in the first act. And at the end of the show, Kenneth Barnes went to Noah Coward, was there anybody from that local town who would have shown any talent in his sort of and Noah Coward, I was very impressed. But the young man who played the murderer of the man who murdered in the first act, remarkably good performance, but detective who found out who murdered him in the last. And I probably kissed Noah Coward partly on both cheeks. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And he was a sort of guru of mine the rest of my life. I mean, this was a typical example of because I was being a rebel and being silly and didn't want to be bothered with it. I wanted to sort of go ahead and get busy and get out and do some acting and get on the road and really learn my trade. And my son Sean, who you've ever seen, he's a very good up-and-coming young actor. You've never seen any chance stuff. He played chance anyway. And he played the young rebel son, in the French Foreign Legion and hard case and the thing. He was very much the same. He's a very dedicated actor now. He gets himself very deeply into his role. And but he was a rebel at Bristol Old Vic too, and he caused problems like I did.
So where did the acting back come from? I know you came from a theatrical background.
The generations of us have been in it.
But it was a very peculiar type of performing to do. I don't think anyone ever come close to really actorising it like serious or comedy or entertainment or whatever.
Yeah, well, I don't know where that comes from. My father was an actor too before he became a well-known playwright and scenarist. But he was the most dreadful actor. And much to my brother Michael's infuriation, he would appear and act in his own movies. And if he wrote a British movie, which he wrote an enormous number of in the sort of 30s and 40s and 50s, go on British, something like that, he would insist on playing a small role in the picture that he had written. And my brother and I have hidden, and my son, we hide our faces in horror that he's so terrible. Dreadful old hand he was, but he was damn good writer. So I mean, he doesn't brush off all the way. I mean, my brother's a very good writer and not a very good actor. I'm not a very good writer and he's not a reasonable actor. So although there's an artistic thing which goes through all my family, on my mother's side, her antecedents were jesters in the early Austrian court. They used to hit kings over their head with ladders. I don't know, why do people laugh when you do that? The kings fall on the floor, groaning with unseemly mirth when he's over there with a bladder. I mean, I would have him killed. If anybody hit me up, they thought it was practically funny. I never understood quite why that was so funny, but that's what they were anyway, my early antecedents on my mother's side.
But would you ever admit to having any role models and say, I really like this type of performance, this is something that...
Oh, of course. Oh, yes, there are people that I go and see or used to go and see that I just want to give up. I remember a great case in point. You're all far too young to see him. You probably never heard of it. But the greatest comedian that England ever had was an actor, or not an actor, was a comedian called Sid Bean. And Sid Bean, he made one film called London Town, which where you get a chance to see it, because you can get it a little German, how desperately funny he was. But he was in the North as a comedian for years, as a sketch comic. And they wanted to bring him into the West End, but Dal Parnell and Mossad said no, he wouldn't go in London. But eventually somebody had the guts to bring him, George Malcolm Black, I think, brought him to London. And he absolutely swamped him, and people said this is the funniest man who's ever lived. And he was. I used to go with Angela Batley, play the cook, and upstairs, downstairs. And we used to go and watch the show, and halfway through the show, she'd be under the seat, howling with pain because her ribs were breaking, and she's saying, I can't stand anymore, take me home, I can't take it anymore. She could never sit through the whole lot of 60 years, paralyzed. And I was making a film at that time for Danny Kaye, called Knock on Wood, and he couldn't come to England, so I doubled for him. And when he did eventually come over to England at the end of the shooting, I took him with his house guest, Groucho Marx, to see Sid Field. And in the interval, two of them, Danny Kaye and Groucho Marx, said, well, we better pack up and retire. Because, I mean, you get a man as funny as that, we don't even know where the comedy begins. So you get people who have this sort of genius of being funny, naturally, so everybody has role models, as I did with Danny Kaye.
All the early press beginning to make that, extraordinary.
Yes, I know they did. I was calling them Danny Kaye, which was virtually untrue. I wasn't, because I didn't do anything anything like Danny Kaye. I avoided everything I possibly could to be like. The only reason I made the film was because I thought that I could put them over a barrel by saying that I didn't want the job to double for Danny Kaye because I didn't want any reference to Danny Kaye. But I said eventually, in order to stop them, it was being boring. I asked for an enormous amount of money, a suite of the Savoy, Rolls-Royce hire. Well, I went on this ridiculous, a caravan to live in while the film was on, and I wanted a caravan when it was over, but it must be a four-person, and it must have a flush toilet. I mean, all these things. I knew they'd say no. And my agent said, what else can we ask? I said, students, all the students. And I went, well, all the students. We put all this down, and they said yes. And I was hoisted with my own petard, they say, and I had to do the film. And it was an agreement that no mention would be made to the press about going on a bed in this image. And Danny Kaye on the opening night was sent by one of the British colonists to a ball, and he said, well, Jon Pertwee did a very good job working for you. And that he said, yeah, Jon did a great job. Thank you very much indeed. That's official. He had every newspaper in England, newspaper of their work.
What's the longest stage anything gave you population like that working?
Oh, I was always in London. I'm a Londoner. I never had to come down from anywhere.
More to the actual West End.
Going into the West End? Yeah. Well, the first thing I went into the West End with was when I was in Wakefield, when I was on musical. And Peter Fellows and I took the other part of the bill of a man called Red Eagle. There was a song called Cigarettes and Whiskey and Wild, Wild Women. You ever remember that song? Cigarettes and whiskey and wild, wild women. And it was a tremendous hit, and they brought this band leader over, but because of musicians' union problems, they wouldn't let him have his band, and they've got a pickup band of relatively nauseous English session musicians who did not like to perform on stage. So he died a terrible death, and it never really to Peter and I, so we were rather hit lucky on that, and that's really what got us away. But
was it a tough act to do, kind of do those retirement, those that was on the way down?
It was on the way down, yes, but on the other hand, we were from radio, and radio was then all powerful, so the radio men were these people out to speak, they didn't really want to see the old actors, those no actors, they see for years, because they were always the same. And Wilson Kemble and Becky were 72 years, and Joe did this, and they didn't say that. They went through about 9 Beckys with Wilson Kemble and Becky number 9.
You were very much part of that kind of London, the actual scene of this sort of 50s.
Yes.
I think a lot of people don't realise that amongst your friends was actually Stephen Ward, who was very much tied up in the humour affairs.
Very much tied up, yes. He was a great friend of mine, Stephen Ward. He had a cottage down in Cleveland, which you probably see in the film Scandal. And it was in the film Scandal? Yeah. And he had this cottage where all these orgies, unbelievable orgies, supposed to take place. Well, I used to go every weekend with my wife, Ingeborg, to these hideous orgies, the famous Andy Rice Davis and Christine Keeler. And I'd been on several of these incredible orgies, which consisted of going into Cleveland Woods and looking for mushrooms. That's absolutely true. I've been weekend after weekend with them both. They were absolutely enchanting. And we used to go look for mushrooms. That was about the sexiest thing that I ever saw. So I was absolutely heartbroken when he sort of stood up and he called us. The whole thing was a fix. Somebody made a mistake. Somebody, a politician, said, get Stephen Ward. And they didn't know the expression was the constabulary to get. It's the fix. And so then when he said, get Stephen Ward, that came from the minister, they just made sure that they got him, and they got all kind of full set of that, but I'm hoping it can be today, 2025.
Really, yes, this would have been the sort of year that we touched in the second volume of the biography, which brings me on to it's a question that is originally asked, isn't it? Anyone who's seen the second volume of
well, when it's written,
biography.
what happened was that I was in World War Garbage, and we were great guns, and we had about 12 million viewers a week with it. And Southern Television lost their franchise. Suddenly, bang, they were fired, like, schoolboys that was thrown out of school. And they weren't allowed to produce anymore. And we suddenly one day realized what had happened to us. There was everywhere, was probably the most popular show of all time on television. I mean, no children's show, ostensibly children, although 75% of the viewers were adults. But like Dr. Who, with 12 million viewers, just suddenly found you haven't got a producer. So I searched around and I found one of Michael James Mitchell in the Irish RM, which was a very good series, and they've seen all the lovely Irish character actors. And we were going to do it, and we signed a contract, we were going to do 2 years. Willis took a lot of scripts, my writers, and they changed them to Ireland, and they were lovely Irish character actors. I was absolutely thrilled about this. We were going to shoot in the studio, which was south of Dublin, and we were part of the country. 5 days before we went to the studio, they cancelled the entire series. With HDB and James Mitchell had fallen out. James Mitchell was right down man, not a tactful American gentleman, had gone over to America and said today I'll say everything about your Harlech in HDB to the department. And so Harlech read this and said, right, cancel it, and cancel the whole thing. So I was 2 years stuck with nothing to do. I hadn't booked anything else because I was stuck working after that period of time. And I was very involved in the production and direction of the trial stage. And so I had 2 years with nothing to do. So I decided to write my autobiography, which I did sitting on a balcony in the morning in my place down door and something to release on a pier. And so I would sit up there in the morning and write for about 4 or 5 hours, and then I go ski in the afternoon.
It's quite an extraordinary autobiography. It is wildly between these very serious actions, with very much background and how you became the person you are. I mean, these wild flights of, well, I would say fancy, but quite extraordinary chapters in Navy life and the rotating radio.
Yeah.
I think obviously the popular spectrum of the second volume become more of a Navy life.
Yeah, well, it would do. I mean, I've got that all written up. I've got all the sort of Doctor Who types written up and the Navy life. But in the main, no, because I'm an actor born and bred and generations of us have been in the theatre, so I don't have to fight to be a member of it. What I'd like to do is take the money that I've earned and use it to good effect, which to me has been to make travel. And so if anybody says that we're making a very interesting film in the Woman of Ulu, in some wild Ulu, I'd go like a shot without even asking where it was. Because I've always wanted to go to the Woman of Ulu. And I wouldn't say what's the part. And that's what made me travel so much. I made all the pictures like Master's Desert, things where I got stuck in the out in the Magadi Desert in Central Africa and Kenya. What are you doing that for? I said, because I wanted to go to that part of the world. And I wanted to go this time. And that's taken me, and I've always taken shows out there when there was a field of war. Since the war, I always made a promise about shows wherever there was a war. So I went to Korea during the Korean War. And to Vietnam, when it was French, the Indian food, and Malaya during the Malayan War, Cyprus, the French War, I've always been there. So when my show was over, I'd then stay on and get to know the place, because somebody else was paying for it.
Did you have any trepidation about, in a way, retreading, like coming back to Scotland and approaching the stage play?
No, I didn't, because at that particular time I was desperately searching around to try and find something else, because I knew the work was coming to an end. We finished shooting, we shot it in New Zealand eventually, we were coming down under, with a New Zealand producer, and of course what was good was again got Jeffrey Bale, and you have got the particular actors, and you have all the scenery, all the set, there's lovely buildings, there's beautiful buildings in that. Don't have anything like that, but you've got no actors. And that was over, and there wasn't much else going on. And then it was originally mooted that did anybody see the stage version of Doctor Who? Yeah? Oh, quite a nice. Well done. Thank you. And and it would have been very much better had the producer really bothered to spend money on it. Yeah, well, I'm going to avoid mentioning that. Thank you. But the producer didn't spend enough money on it, but the result was when you had a scene where Graham Smith was dying and the girl and Deborah were sort of fighting with the controls of the Daleks console. It was, shaking and things were falling off it. It was really hot. I mean, every time I pulled the lever, it fell off in the hand. And we were promised that it was going to be $1 million production. And originally, it was going to be in Australia. And of course, you may not know this, but the two companions were going to be played by, do you remember?
Jason Donovan.
Jason Donovan, yeah. And then, of course, they suddenly became the biggest things in the world in the pop scene, having got Scott Walton, having got hold of them. And of course, at the time of the question, they couldn't do it, so the Australian production went to the wall. And they then said, well, we'll do it in England. You want to do it? So I said, yes, I'll do it for 8 weeks. We sure were. Yeah, but I'm used to that in Vertigo. We used to do that all the time. I would do split weeks sometimes. So do the first 3 days in Bournemouth, the last 3 days in Aberdeen. That was good. That was how
sometimes on very, very small stages as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now the play is actually finished now. So about halfway through. Was that a decision that?
Oh yes.
It was just taking a few months time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was too hectic because I was never on the stage really, and it was a bit tiring.
Were you surprised by the fact that so many people wanted to come and see really a Doctor who was so many years in the past as far as the television audience is concerned?
No, I wasn't. I'm never surprised at anything that the fans of Doctor Who do and think and want. It's always a sort of amazement to me where they come out of the woodwork. I was in Australia and I was in some incredible little backwoods town, and minuscule thing with just a few shacks. In fact, there was a pub in it, and it had holes in the corrugated iron ceiling. And I said to the man, what's this? He said, I'll worry about that. He said, that's old Jack, he'll be in a minute. And eventually an old man came in, and he ordered about 4 pints of beer, which he put on the table. He took out a paperback book, a cowboy book, and he was going, and he took his gun out and he fired bullets from the ceiling. Because he was a cowboy book. And he said, Slim Jim took out his revolver. Bang, bang, he went. Bang, bang, he was and right when I was there, I ran into 2 people and they said, Jesus Christ, it's the Doc. What do you know? We know this Doctor Who, mate. No. And this is just fine. You can't believe what Australia's like, how big it is. This is done hundreds of miles anyway. You wouldn't think they had electricity. Little known television set, but they get it. So I'm never surprised where they turn out. So I wasn't surprised that it was so incredibly popular. Although I must say in Aberdeen, nobody turned up at all. I don't think they'd ever heard of Doctor Who in Aberdeen. Most extraordinary thing, we had this beautiful theatre, and we had there's a poster, the publicity was very good. There was one poster about that big outside the theatre, which said Jon Pertwee spelled wrong, in Doctor Who, the ultimate adventure. That was it. That's the publicity outside the front of the theatre. And so we did no business at all, and I said, well, that's it, that's Scotland for you. We went to Glasgow, and we were a sensation. I mean, absolutely packed. We could have played there another 2-3 weeks.
That's almost it. The second thing is you've had so many different receptions from different parts of the world. Good Doctor Who fans, Universal Damage fans, are they? Different age groups, different types of people that come to see them.
Very much so. In Americans, the age is much, much older. The average age of what they call Whovians, the average age of the Who, or 100% Whovian, is around between 28 and 35. Much older than this country. Although it's getting older now. You remember in the very early days of Who fandom in this country. Remember well, you yourself, and my friend who brought me here, remember Stuart Money, some of mine is the director of Spillers now. He used to write to me, and I thought I had these wonderful letters from him, and they were typed and beautifully written and couched. I was fascinated by this, and he wrote and said, could I come and meet you one day and sort of see the Doctor Who being made. So I asked Barry Letts, the producer, and he said, yes, of course. And I went 3 times into the foyer to meet him, and he wasn't there. And on the third time, I was getting really angry about it, but I thought I was going to tug on my jacket. And I turned around, and there was this sort of minuscule midget standing alongside him, and he looked up at me, he said, Pertwee, and I said, yes, what did he say? My name is Stuart Mulligan. I said, you're not the fellow who's been writing to me for the last 4 or 5 years. He said, yes. I mean, he didn't look old enough to be able to hold a pen and learn to stand and type. And he was a firm fan in those days, as generally was when he was a very young man. I don't know how long have I known him? Not long enough. And anyway, so here they all are still. Very professional, still following.
Well, I think our only platform here far too long now. I'm sure we'll see like those guys who asked us to Jon Pertwee.
Which twin is going to ask the question? Are you twins? I gather it must be.
When you were doing the Navy Lark, was that sort of background to the studio audience?
Yes, it was. It was very interesting. The Navy Lark was my radio show. Put your hand down, because it will be a long time before I come to Ireland. The Navy Lark was a show about the Navy, obviously, with Leslie Phillips and Ronnie Barker and so on. It ran for 20 years. And we did it at the Paris Cinema, Lower Regent Street. And when we came in for rehearsals, I would sit where you're sitting, Richard Caldecott would sit there, Ronnie Barker would sit where you are, Leslie Phillips would sit there. Everybody sat for 20 years in the same seats always. And one day we came in, and Alistair Scott Johnson, who was the same producer for 20 years, came in on the first day, and we had all arranged to sit in different seats. I sat there, Leslie sat there, and he came in, he said, well, now, boys and girls, one thing to... It's marvellous to be do it like this. I'm not feeling very well. And it took him 5 minutes to realise what was wrong. He got so mentally buzzed of where the places we were sitting. In fact, we were sitting in different places completely through it, because it had always been the same. We had the audience, to answer your question, we had the audience, and the audience was nearly always the same. And sitting there, that seat was a blind gentleman. He'd come for years and years and years. And he came down one day and somebody was sitting in his seat. He said, would you mind moving? This is my seat. The fellow said, will you get up? That's going to sit down on with you. He said, it's my seat. I've sat in the seat for 20 years, and I want to sit down. He said, John, I'll get you over there with this stick. And he probably did, and so he sat down. So we had the audience, but very predominantly and very largely they were the same, including 2 twin ladies of about 85. And they used to come regularly to see the show. But they went to see all the shows. Yeah, that is that young gentleman there, and he stand up.
Oh, yes, which was your least favourite Doctor Who story?
The one which is strangely enough extremely popular on video, which I think is the Day of the Daleks. We had a director who will be named Jeremy, will probably jump in now and use him in we had a scene when we were in this beautiful country house, and there was a Commonwealth meeting, and all the prime ministers of all the countries were congregating in this house. And somebody came in and said, we're being invaded by Daleks. And the Daleks are moving in on the house, and you must all go, because the Daleks were out to wipe out all the prime ministers. And the director allowed the scene to go by, which when I saw it, I could not believe. They all came out very slowly, and they said, oh my, I will see you again in Africa. Very good to see you. Transfer, and they were all talking about it as if they were going to a tea party. And there were all these Daleks were moving in on them and about to massacre them and exterminate them. I can't believe it. He must have forgotten. He must have completely forgotten really script about what the scene was. And of course there were none of the featured players. It was all the prime ministers. So they didn't know all the extras going all and so we then had a scene where the invasion of the Daleks was supposed to take place. And I said to the director, where are the Daleks? He said, there. And there were 3 of the tattiest Daleks I had ever seen. They'd been in a coat paint. You could see John Scott Martin's feet through the bottom of it. Robert Fripp come off, and you could see his little feet like that, walking along. But the Daleks said, this is the invasion. And he said, yes. And I said, well, why are you going to get a shot of all these Daleks moving in on this house? Oh, we'll shot all different sequences. You see, we'll shot 2 of them coming down there, then we'll move them. We'll have 3 coming down there and 1 coming in here. I said, well, you've got to have one shot with all of them. Well, we can't do that, and then you got three. So that was my most unfavourite shot. I thought it was dreadful. But amazingly, it sells very well as a video. You probably got it, didn't you? Yeah? Yes, sir.
Your role must be probably and we're not more fucking travel when you got the part of the doctor.
No, no way. I didn't bother myself with anybody because quite truthfully I hadn't seen anybody. I was very busy myself at that time working in films. I used to make a lot of movies in that sort of period when a lot of British movies were being made. And so I never saw it at all. But then my first wife was an actress lady called Jean Marsh, who they remember from upstairs, downstairs. And she was in it. She was in an early Doctor Who. And so she said, well, you must watch in 9 minutes. And I said, oh, yeah, all right, I will. So I watched. That was the Still Heart. Was it full of prejudice? And so I saw it then. But no, I had no preconceived ideas, and certainly I wasn't going to copy anybody else. I mean, that's the whole idea of having a very different type of characters with different cast. Kind of characters to be casted. So Pat was Pat and I was me and Tom was Tom. Yeah.
The records you made there, I'm Doctor.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea and why did you do it?
For money. I thought it would be a big seller. And it would have been if for some extraordinary reason. Yes, I know exactly what it was. It's called I Am the Doctor. On the other side was an even better track called Pure Mystery, which I thought was a marvelous song. It's a very good song. My old conjurer became with the children. That's very good. I love it. Anyway, we made this record, the Doctor Who record, and it was then presented to all the young record producers for all the big disc jockey shows like the Housewives' Choice and all these things going then, and Rocky and lunchtime. And the young men turned it down and said, no, we don't want that. I said, I can't believe this. It's a BBC programme produced by the BBC with BBC's money, and the opportunity to go and plug it and push it is there because of BBC radio programmes, and they banned it. And so it never got any play, and that's why it never sold. That's why it's a collector's item, and if you've got a copy, hang on to it, but it's worth a fortune in America. Yeah, they actually did a reissue of it. Somebody did a reissue without Pure Mystery on the back, but I think it got Doctor Who's theme. Yes, sir.
What do you remember about acting with William Hall in the Three Doctors?
I remember it vividly because I couldn't act with him because he was so sick, he was dying. And he was supposed to be acting with us on the floor, like Pat did. But he couldn't because he was too ill. He had to sit down. So what we did, we went down to Ealing Film Studio, and we sat him in a chair with sides and with arms, a sort of high stool. And we had an idiot board put in front of him with all his lines on it, and we shot him on film. And then if you remember, all the scenes that we played with him was on a monitor, on video. So we looked up to the monitor in the whatever it was, in the TARDIS, was it? And then the first line when he looked, he came in, he said, the dandy and the clown. So that line very well.
You actually met him when you did the publicity shots.
Oh, sure. Well, no, we met him when we shot that sequence where he was sitting, because we had to give him his cues and that sort of thing. So where he was sitting down reading the lines off the board, and we were sort of coming off camera and giving the lines to him. So we met him and we looked up in the head, and with his wife was then around there with him looking after us.
A lot of people who have seen before in America when you were here in London and town are quite staggered at the sort of amazing double act that came together between the two of you, which originally had a slight antipathy towards each other, but different styles of acting.
That's right. Well, what happened was that Pat Triton had a very strange way of working. He used to learn lines more or less. And his team that loved him to death. And they went with him on this learning the lines more or less. And so if he had a cue which was supposed to be, make sure that circle is right over the tablecloth, Pat would say, here, I think it's very important that that old bit of plastic should be over here over this blue thing. And people would say, that's the cue, and they would then go and they would follow on. Now, he was underneath the TARDIS, and he was supposed to say to me something like, Doctor, I can't find the Ujima brick, I've dropped it. So he said to me, Oi, where's that? Watch it. I'm sitting on the damn thing, for example. So there was a terrible pause for me. And so the director said, Cut, stop, what's going on? And I said, I have the faintest idea. And Pat came out from under the towel. He said, what's up? And I said, what was that line about sitting on something? And he said, well, it's your cue. I said, my cue is the plastic thing to be on the top of the tablecloth. And he said, oh, you know, whatever I told you. And he said, oh, well, come on, that's near enough, isn't it? And I said, no, it's bloody well isn't. I said, I work my way, you work your way. When you're working with me, I'm the doctor now, not you. I said, you're just the helper. You give me my cue, please. So he thought, oh. But he hadn't got his team with him, you see. I had my team, so my team backed up with me. Our doctors, you know, I mean that. And so we then started this sort of edginess. And if you remember, in all the things we were ever together in the three doctors, he was always crabbing at me and pushing me out the light and called me fancy pants. And then we did the five doctors, the same thing, where we were always pitching each other. So when we appeared, and I eventually persuaded Pat to come and do these conferences, but he never did. He was a very shy man. He liked his own company, he didn't really like being involved in these things until the end, when he absolutely adored it in an easy way. In fact, he died at the conference, you know. And somebody gave me a water pistol. No, they gave Pat a water pistol, that's right. And they said, when Doc 3 starts being toffee nose, spray him with a water pistol. So we were all sitting in a long line, I've forgotten where it was. I think it was in Chicago. And he picked up this water pistol. He said, oh, shut up. It hit me right in the eye, you see, this water pistol. Now, my fans wouldn't have that, so they brought me a water pistol about that big. So from about 30 or 40 feet, I got him right in the ear hole on the next time. And then, so they gave him an even bigger water pistol. And eventually it finished up, and I had a backpack with a 5-gallon tank with a gun this big, and I got him from right up the back of the gallery here. I got him square right into his gun. Radio, and of course this started this war. And of course all the fans knew that we adored each other. We were close friends. We just the front up. And Pat then ditched the thing by taking, without my knowing it, got an enormous umbrella and went boom and protected himself with it. Well, a couple of years later, Children in Need, we did a massive lot of us. We all came walking out of the TARDIS, about $100. People have been in Doctor Who. And I came out, Pat started with this argument, this row with me, fancy pants, and grabbing a go at me. And Terry Wogan stepped up and said, right, lads, I go on, no, let's have none of that. And we suddenly realized that Terry believed that we were having an argument. And I went to Terry and said, I'm not standing with this. And he said, yes, I know. Now, don't let's watch that. And to this day, he doesn't believe it. And I was talking to him the other day, and I said, it really was, this was a joke. We think that I wasn't going to have any of that in my program. Yeah. Yes.
How did you get on with Kate Manning? Especially with the
Katie Manning was blind as a bat, she couldn't see a thing, so she went everywhere with me because she didn't know where the hell she was going. So that if I was driving a motorbike, which I did because I didn't do all my own stunts, and I was stupid like that, she said I wouldn't falling off, I wouldn't fall off. But I did everything else, rode the speedboats, the aeroplanes, the ski and the speedboats and all these things. I did. And Katie would come with me, because she took her glasses off, she couldn't know where she was, she hung on tight and where we went. Very gutsy little lady, and she probably made me laugh more than anybody I've ever done in my life. She's wildly funny, and still is. I was with her in Australia 4 weeks ago. She's touring Australia in blind spirit, no card, blind spirit. She's complaining bitterly. She spent half the show locked up in a grand piano, which is very uncomfortable. Because she comes out of the grand piano in the grand spirit. She's looking very well indeed. She's got twin boys, they're about 13, 14 now. And she seems very happy. It seems to be that she's walking out with a gentleman who sings Neighbours, Barry Crocker. You know, the Neighbours, who sings Barry Crocker. And I think that she's walking out with Barry Conrad now. But she's wonderfully well, and I love working with her. She's brilliant one day and appalling the next. She's very material. Unlike this lady who was always on the level and was a marvelous professional, very, very good actor. A better actress by far than Katie, but nothing like the magic that Katie had. Katie in top form was wild, absolutely wonderful. And incredible things happened to her. Yeah. Yes?
Whose makeup did you like best?
In what?
Whose makeup did you like best?
Changing makeup, that's alien.
Oh, the alien makeup. Oh, without question, the draconian. I liked the whole period of Doctor Who when they got using face masks. I hated Cybermen and Ice Warriors because they had mouths all in a shame, through them, which it seems silly. Why have a mouth if you're not speaking properly? And so you might as well not have it. You might say the Latins have a like a Dalek voice, an electronic voice over it. Seems silly having mouths that don't work. So when the half mask, which was originally invented for 2001, with the AIDS, and they used diminutives, as they did in that wonderful, you see Greystone, you know, the marvelous film Greystone. Well, you know that 50% of those apes were in fact human beings. They were diminutives, and they were trained about 6 months before to be able to do one-arm pull-ups on bars with their feet tucked up. And so you never knew who was an ape and who was a human being, because they used the human eye, which is almost like an ape's eye, and the mouth. And so we used it in the first, I think it was the Draconians, no, with the Ogron. The Ogron was the first. They didn't fit terribly well, but they eventually improved it. And they got it right in the Draconians, who got this wonderful makeup, that's a very good actor.
Peter Bill,
Peter Bill.
Side of the quality.
That was a marvelous story. That had a tremendous job. Peter Bill, who played the leading Draconian, he was a great authority on outer space, stars, astronomy. And we was at night time, we were waiting for the dawn to break in this quarry. And then Katie and I and Peter and the whole group of us all sitting around. And Peter was talking at this Draconian with this half moonlight on it. And I was completely transported. We were all deadly silent listening to him talking about travel in space and going through one planet to another. And suddenly the voice said, "Right out, sausage rolls are up." And came down to earth, and it gave me the shock of the life. And it really gave me a tremendous shock, because I had gone, and it came to exactly the same thing to transport, because the face of makeup was superb. Yeah. What made you have such a family? I'm a great believer in teams. My radio show, I say, ran 20 years because we were a team. The only person that left it was Ronnie Barker, and he only left it because he was so busy with his own shows that he just couldn't handle it. It was too much. And also, I was a great believer that it was much more frightening to have the aliens invade Earth rather than the us go to other planets. And I've told this story 1,000 times, but it does still cover it. I said, there's nothing more alarming than coming home and finding a Yeti sitting on your loo in Tooting Bec. Now, if you think about that, it's a very alarming thing to find a Yeti sitting on the loo in Tooting Bec, because you don't expect to see a Yeti there. But if, on the other hand, you go to the Himalayas, and you go out, and you go up the snow path, and you open the privy door, and there's the Yeti, you say, "Oh, I do beg your pardon." And because you expect him to be there, because that's his habitat. So, on the same premise, it's much more alarming, therefore, to see Daleks streaming over Waterloo Bridge, or to see dinosaurs coming out of Morden Underground and coming through the tunnel. That is frightening. And that's why, during the first, 3 years of my tenure? About 3 years of my tenure, I was on Earth. And I think that is why it was such a popular time, because we were on Earth, and therefore, being on Earth, you had to have a team of Earth people. Apart from the companion, you needed, as we had a brigadier, he was always in it, old Nick, and then he had his team. That's where Sergeant Benton, John Levine had originally been that Yeti sitting on the loo in Tooting Bec. He was a Yeti when he first started. And he was very good as Sergeant Benson, and then Richard Franklin was Captain Yates, and then we developed a team, and then Terry Walsh had this wonderful team called Havoc, which for the first time they got together a group of real men, instead of an extremely camp gentlemen who came in Swiss soldiers, with long hair, and now everybody wearing earrings. I mean, it was ridiculous. I said to Barry, "Would you fit? What is this?" He said, "Well, they're the extras of the army." I said, "Well, they've all got to go and have haircuts. I mean, the army don't allow people to have hair down to their shoulders, and it just makes mockery of it." So we luckily got rid of them, and we got Havoc in. And this was a group of the toughest stuntmen I've ever known in my life, and led by Derek Ware. Derek Ware, bless him, he was the worst stuntman that ever lived. If he fell out of a car on a job, he broke his leg. So they used him always because it was much more effective than having somebody like Roy, because he was a professional diver. When he fell out of the car, he'd go, into beautiful tucks, and it didn't look good. But Derek Ware would look marvellous because he broke his leg. so all the rest of the gang used to think he was hysterical, you see, and they'd say, "Go on, Derek, you do the job. What do you do?" "Oh, you do the lovely job of this." And they'd say, "Watch him fall over, he'll crack himself." And nine times out of 10 he did, but he had the job of employing all the others. And Terry eventually took over, and we had this tremendous team of stuntmen in Havoc, and that's why all the action stuff was so well done. There was a story about that when you remember that scene when, I think it was the Inferno, when I was chasing around in a sort of oil-drummed area of the big depot, the storage depot, and this was in a documentary. It's true, you know.
It's true.
Yes. And a fellow was supposed to jump out in front of me with a gun, and his name was Alan Chumsey. He was Jewish and the toughest guy I've ever seen, and a black belt shooter, really tough guy. And he said, "Right, gun," he said, "it was your full gun." I said, "Right, gun," he said, "Now then, you jump out," he said, "I'll jump out in front of the motor," I said, "and you keep barreling down there, and you don't take your foot off the accelerator, keep it the same speed, gun, right? Don't change the speed, 35 miles an hour, I'll jump out, I'll say, stop, you don't stop, I'll get out the line, right? Okay, go." So I said, "Right, I'll jump in." So I drove down the 35 mile an hour, and he didn't get out the line in time, and I hit him. And I hit him with the bumper at about 35 mile an hour, and there was a crack like that. And I thought, "Oh my God, I've heard this before, with limbs breaking." They took him to hospital, they put 18 stitches in his leg, put it in a plastic bag, came back with a bigger boot, and came back and said, I don't feel too good," he said, "Lads," he said, "but I don't want the gun to be upset." And he came back, 18 stitches in his leg, and he knew that I'd be upset by hitting him. So he went back on the floor, and he tried to work, because he couldn't, he passed out cold after about 5 minutes of work. And they took him back home, and all the way back he said to Terry Walsh, "For God's sake, don't tell the wife, she'll kill me." He was terrified of his missus, and she said, "You stupid bugger," she said, "you know what is this silly job at your age, 80 stitches near there." But she knew he was a stuntman, but she didn't like to do it. So a great bunch of guys. Yeah.
How do you think Anthony used to play the most to sort of come up to the standard set by Roger Delgado?
How do I think?
Do you think he's sort of Anthony trying to come up to sort of match the standard?
Now, sir, if I answered your question and I said Roger Delgado was a very personal friend of mine, and I thought he was a superb actor, which I did, and I've seen Anthony, and in fact I think he stinks. You happen to be going to a Doctor Who convention next month, and who should be there? But Anthony said, "Oh, Miss Brainy, I've got a question. I was at a conference last week and I saw Jon Pertwee, and I asked him what he thought of you compared to Roger Delgado. He said, frankly, he thought you stank." and he would say, "Did he?" Well, let me tell you a thing about him. I can remember how before you know where you are, you've got a war on your hands. So the answer is, I never answer questions like that. I never give opinions about directors or producers or people who took over or what the present Doctor's like from the first Doctor. All I can say is that I thought that Roger gave a wonderful performance, and I think that Anthony Ainley, who is my godfather, his father was my godfather, so, and I think he gave a great performance too. But after all, he is playing the same role, and not like us. We can play the Doctor in our own way. He had to be like Roger, and it's a very difficult thing to do, to try to take over from somebody else and be somebody else. Very hard.
think what a lot of what certainly nobody here will, myself, have had the privilege to meet Roger. But how did you two get on as also markedly different personalities? What we believe Roger Delgado is like.
Well, there were several things that made him popular in his eyes. One, that I introduced him to his wife, to Kismet, because Kismet was an old girlfriend of mine years and years ago. And so I was able to introduce Roger to her. Secondly, we both liked wine and port, and good food. And we'd been friends a long time before. And he was an extraordinary man because he was the most venomous looking man, the most evil looking man that ever lived, and yet he was the gentlest. And I've always described Roger as being the bravest man I ever knew because he was a coward. By that, I mean, and I don't mean this in a derogatory fashion, but he was frightened of his own shadow. The very thought of Roger getting onto that little jet bike in the sea levels, but I had to chase him, those little jet bikes. And it filled him with abject horror. I mean, he nearly fainted with fear before we actually got him onto it. And then he could only do it for 3 minutes, and that was in water he could stand in. And he said, I've got to get off, but he did it enough. And when we put him in also the sea devils, where he was in a flotation suit, and we floated him around in the channel, I was in there having a ball because I had a bottle of rum in there with me. And I think I had Katie Manning in there with me too. and I was floating around this thing, and it was lovely, and I was warm as a button, and it was looking ridiculous, but I had an Eskimo baby, the top face is sticking out. Roger was just lying there, he went green. And it took him 3/4 of an hour to go over the side of this trawler we were on to get into the boat and drop him into the water. And then one of the assistant directors said, oh, Mr. Delgado, please do hurry up. And I remember Barry Depps absolutely going to him, ragging. He said, would you beat Mr. Delgado? Because it was a miracle. Barry knew and understood, but the fact that he actually got him to get into the water at all was miraculous. And it showed enormous courage. I mean, I'm an idiot, so it didn't worry me. I mean, I didn't do anything. For a buzz, when they said to me, you've got to get out of the helicopter and go down a rope ladder onto a moving boat, I said, oh, great, where do we do this? Not thinking, well, that's a bit touchy. Yeah, Terry, you do this. Well, Terry and I had a wonderful agreement that I would do stunts, but not falls. Anything that I knew I thought I couldn't do, stunt, I couldn't do it. And so we had a lovely line that Terry would creep up to me before a stunt and he'd say, here goes. Make it look good. But it actually meant that all his stunt brothers would think that it was him doing it, and so it's got to look good, because people say Terry did a nice job, you see. Because you never could tell when Terry did do these stunts, you never really could tell whether it was Neil, whether it was him, because he never ever showed his face. Wonderful that way. And when we left at the end of the show, he gave me a beautiful sword, a two-handed fighting sword, and he put on it, he said, to Jon Pertwee, the best acting double in the business.
I think a young man down there.
Yes.
What radio characters you played? Which was your favourite?
Radio characters? Well, you wouldn't remember any of them, sir. But, I did a character with a man called Eric Barker in the Navy in 1944, 1945, I think it was, in which I had to play a Norwegian seaman. And I remember the first line I had to say was, and everything, what you say? And I said, well, that's something I've heard on the radio. The fellow says every day, here is the news in Norwegian. And it was something to do with bombing, obviously nothing to do with bombing. And so he said this, and that's all he ever said in the show was, and they would say, oh, good morning, Spencer, how are you today? And he said, you had your lunch? He said, and he said, oh, well, that's all right, then you don't need anything else audible. And they said, goodbye, Spencer, that's all he ever said. And that was my first character that I ever did on radio. And I did after that with Eric Barker during the 5 years. He ran after the war and we brought the show North Spa. And I did many characters. One was a postman. He'd originally been the bugler in Plymouth Barracks when we were a naval show. And he was always saying, Bugling, the old time Bugling. Bugling, the commander officer's here. And then there'd be a catchphrase, it was the hero catchphrase. And when we became a civilian show, he was the postman. And his catchphrase, he was always steaming letters over. And his catchphrase at the end when he went off was, oh, well, what does it matter what you do as long as you tear them up? And everybody was going around using this catchphrase. Everybody. What does it matter what you do as long as you tear them up? And of course, years and years later, where did that voice appear? Well, the Gummidge. Because Keith Willis will all remember his voice and remember the character. So he preferred to play the Scarecrow, so that he came. So that was probably my most favourite character on the radio. I liked the Chief in the Navy Lark, that was fun. And I particularly liked the character. There was a stuttering intelligence officer. There was another man who I liked, who was called Beverly Burwasher. These were all based on characters that I knew. This particular man, say, I actually met him. He said, "Hello, my dear fellow, how are you? You're looking well." My God, he's got a call down there in a minute. What did he say? And he'd say, "How's the wife? Charming woman, can't stand the sight of her." And he used to have his thoughts, but he couldn't stop saying them. And he would go through the whole day like this. "Oh, what a marvelous day. God, what a lovely day." This is that. And so we put him on radio. He's called Admiral Beverly Burwasher. Yeah, anything else?
So were all the voices
Yeah. Every voice I ever used on radio, and I did, I think, about 80 or 90, I suppose, I've done over the years. And they were all based on actual people. I mean, give you an example of this. I was sitting in a bus once with David Jacobs, and I was training him for being an announcer for Radio CF during the war. I was running the Naval Broadcasting Station then. And David came, we used to travel everywhere by bus. And there were two girls sitting on bus, and this shows you how funny overheard conversation can be. And these two girls were talking, and one said to the other, she said, "Here, Billy." "Yes?" She said, "I'm going to the theatre Thursday." And I said, "Oh, yes. What you going to see then?" So there was a show in town at a time called Seagulls over Sorrento. They watched a funny show. And she said, "I think it's called Sea Lions in Toronto." So the other one said, "Oh, that sounds nice." So, a pretty silly remark, really. And the other one said, "Is that the one with the Chinaman in it?" She said, "Oh, I don't think so." She said, "Pity, I like a Chinaman in a play." Right, if you wrote that down in a book, you'd say, "Oh, come on." I mean, nobody talked like that. Nobody talked. I mean, they were all non sequiturs, every single word. The other one didn't care what the other one was saying. He listened, and it's wonderful. And therefore, that's why Alan Bennett, he's such a brilliant writer. You saw Talking Heads. The lovely show, Talking Heads, that Alan Bennett wrote all the many plays that he's written. And they're funny because they're nearly all based on his aunt. His aunt, Dottie, I think her name was. Some name like that. And she would talk in these sort of mad non sequiturs. It was wildly funny, really. I remember another occasion when I was listening on a telephone, and the voice said, "So, I stood there till my vest was wringing wet." And the other one said, "Well, yes, you would, wouldn't you?" And then she said, "Do you think it could have been a horse?" And the other one said, "No." She said, "A rabbit?" She said, "No." "Well, what about a camel?" And the other one said, "No, camels can't reach hanging baskets." Now, think about that and see if you can come up with any sense at all. I have for 20 years tried to think what on earth they were talking about. I've never found out.
You've done some pretty extraordinary things in your own life, haven't you? Looking through some of the Wall of Death right?
Yes, well, I tell you, I was always a lunatic. I rode on the Wall of Death in my early teenage days. The Wall of Death is a big wooden bowl, and you ride a motorbike round and round it. You go up and down like that, and you make all the people go, "Woo!" when he comes up. And you sit sideways on it. It's like going along a road, going uphill, actually, with a driving equipment. Get about the people there at the bottom there, and so on. And but in my particular case, we decided to make it a little different, and we did it. I had a lion in the back. But I was very old, and so we had to scratch his mouth together because we were predicting he was he didn't look very frightening. But Leo, bless him. He sadly died one day while we were actually going round the wall. And we were trying getting a dead lion out of a wall dead. We had to get all the audience away and then take half the wall down to get him out. And that's a pretty air race.
The lion has to take walkies on certain occasions.
No, that was a cheetah. A friend of mine gave me a cheetah because they decided they were going to do cheetah racing at Stamford Bridge instead of greyhound racing. And it wasn't a great success, but they got 4 cheetahs and then the hare went off like that and they then opened the trap and the cheetahs went out and they caught the hare and ate it before it got And so they said, oh, dear, the compere was rather thrown by this. So they said, let the hare go round to there before you let them go this time. So they got them all in. And they opened the trap, and the hare got round to there, and they opened the trap, and the cheetahs went straight across like that, and ate the hare again. So, I mean, they're brilliant, they're very clever animals and chasing them. They're not idiots like greyhounds, stupidly chased round with a tax on a wing. But the cheetahs are very bright animals. So anyway, it was no good. Then they let it go right way around this way, and the cheetahs came round that way and let it coming on. So they stopped all the racing, and they gave me one of these cheetahs. I used to take it for walks and kept it. And I felt really natural. You can imagine, walking along the King's Road, Chelsea, with me with my equivalent of my blue jeans and a chain and a cheetah. I mean, it's really macho stuff. With the girls going, oh, look at that man, he's lion. Didn't even know what it was. And anyway, I used to take it for walks at Wimbledon Common, and we used to chase swallows to get exercise, and they loved that, because they run at 75 mile an hour, short bursts, so the fastest animals in the world. And so we were chasing after these swallows to get exercise, and this particular day went over a hedge and landed in the middle of the picnic. And there was Granny and Mum and Dad and the kids, and everybody, and all the jellies and the pies and the Sallies went to the line, and terrible bloody test. And they all kind of, I was arrested, for a breach of the peace for letting a wild leopard do something with the common. And so I had to return it, and it was taken back to the wild in Kenya, where it lived out the rest of its life.
I imagine you became quite a frequent name as a constabulary. Did you get in trouble with the same constabulary as the Hoovervilles now?
Oh, well, yeah, no, that was much, much later, of course. Yes, the Hooverville, you remember the Hooverville, funny enough, a fellow who else came up to see me in the Milton Keynes 3 days ago. The Hooverville was this, beautiful streamlined car that I had, and I used to drive it on the road, but I never got more than a quarter of a mile before, beep, 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 you're off, pull in. And I press the button, the up the little girl, and I'd sit there like that, and he'd come up and say, nothing across, it's you. And I'd say, I know why you stopped me, you want to inspect the car, but it's all right, it's all correct, it's the right width, it has brakes. He said, it's a hovercraft. I said, no, it's a car, it's got wheels, and you have to get down and go, but they just didn't want to see it. And then I got another quarter of a mile, and then, your German Volkswagen full of students would say, yeah, what's it, Bushman, put the fire, run straight up the arse of a bus. And caused that to mayhem. And so we took it off the road, put it on a low one, and that went on. And we actually drove it on the road, set the building. But it's now looked after by a young man who lost his mother under very tragic circumstances, and the father said, can I buy it off you? Because that's the only thing that I think became my son. Something to give him an interest, he's desperate to lost his mother. And I said, well, you can have it, I'll give it to you, on the condition that I can borrow it whenever I want it. And he said, it's yours. And he made a lovely leather loader, and the car is immaculate. And I saw the young man in it 4 days ago, and the two keys came up to it, and I looked at the Hooverville, still in a good nick.
Did you have much to do with the actual designing of that?
Yes, I did. I designed it myself with a magnificent flowers. He went to a very experienced plastic molder and said, how many pieces can we make this car in? And they said, a minimum of 6. And he said, oh, that's good. And made it in 2. Which is a pretty remarkable piece of molding. The old top piece, with the lovely wings. Remember the Hooverville?
Yeah.
And the top and bottom. I see the governor's hovering.
The governor's hovering, so we'll ask one last question if anyone has them. Young man.
Do you have any unfulfilled ambitions in your career?
Yes, I do. I'm very distressed about the condition of the British film industry. We can make superbly good pictures, but we have a government that sadly, although I must admit I'm a Thatcherite, I don't approve at all of her attitude towards theatre and towards our business. She's got absolutely no interest at all, whereas Howard Wilson has an enormous interest in so she can. He better otherwise, I think, a bottle on the lower deck of the Navy with Jim Callan. I think the industry is in sort of a powerless state, but it shouldn't be, and if we had the finance, we could still make superbly good international pictures. And now it seems to be the Americans have got well over a barrel or something. But I would like to have been back as a part of that industry again. At the age I am, I'd like to go back and playing character roles like I did years ago, not having to carry the burden of series or films on my own shoulders. I'd like to take characters like Leslie Phillips is now doing so brilliantly. I mean, you saw Chancellor when he played that guy and myself, and he was in Scandal for Warriors and playing Lord Astor. That's something I'd like to do, but I doubt whether I'll be able to manage an indifferent industry.
Well, I'm sure we'd all like to join in thanking Jon Pertwee very much indeed for giving us his time this hour.
Delighted.
And we'll hand over the plinth once again to our Master of Ceremonies here, Mr. Clive Earley.
Clive, before you speak, I'm going to go to sign some autographs now. And I've brought the main object of my operation is that I belong to the Grand Order of Water Rats, which is one of the best charity organizations connected to my profession. And so I sell colour posters, copies of my latest book, and photographs, and the money is the profit side of the money goes to my varying charities, like muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, and that sort of thing. So I will be sitting there, wherever it's going to be now, and be delighted to sign any of those articles for you if you do so require.
So Jon Pertwee, thank you very much indeed.
As well, please.
Oh, yes. I would like to say that Jeremy and I were going round the corner on Wednesday. We're going to be doing exactly the same thing in Chicago. Which happens.
So any of you want to come along, please?
Yes.
The next event is the master team at 1 o'clock. Next is lunch, okay? And Jon Pertwee autograph. Thank you.